This is a story about the highest-ranking CIA agent ever to be convicted of espionage. But clearly, this is a story about betrayal. Betrayal of a man against his country and a betrayal of a father against his son.
He would sacrifice his country, he would sacrifice his children for the money, for this lifestyle he wanted. And he's a traitor. I mean, you know, in our line of work, it doesn't really get much worse than that.
Why would a good CIA officer become a traitor? I mean, the guy's so arrogant and psychopathic. It's just unbelievable.
He committed espionage on behalf of a hostile country, and he used people like poker chips. I don't know how you do that if you have a conscience. I mean, his family is destroyed by what he did.
As a former FBI agent and chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, I had oversight of all 16 of our nation's intelligence agencies. My name is Mike Rogers. I had access to classified information gathered by our operatives, people who risked everything for the United States and our families. You don't know their faces or their names. You don't know the real stories from the people who lived the fear and the pressure until now.
There is no doubt in Washington tonight that this is an intelligence disaster. Here's ABC's Bob Zelnick.
CIA Director James Woolsey faced an audience of congressmen anxious to know why it took 9 years to figure out that Aldrich Ames was working for the KGB. By then, intelligence sources say Ames had told the KGB about as many as 10 Russians who were working for the CIA.
When the Ames case broke open, that was a watershed event inside CIA where we had a high-ranking case officer working for an extended period of time for the Russians inside the building. For the agency, that triggered an introspective moment on how did this happen. For many years, we didn't believe it was possible. That myth was shattered.
I felt a lot of anger because I knew what Aldrich Ames mostly had access to. I know there were 8 to 10 agents that were executed as a result of information. One of those was one I was directly involved with. There was a great deal of anger in the Senate intelligence community.
Anger at who?
CIA. They wanted to find him themselves over a long period of time before they brought it to the FBI. But finally, when they did turn it over to us, he had already done most of the damage.
The Ames case is perhaps the most graphic and vivid example of the need to make structural changes in the operation of our intelligence community.
When Aldrich Ames was arrested, we knew he did significant damage to the intelligence community. In addition to that, we had other cases that Aldrich Ames was not involved in that went bad.
You assume at that point that somebody else is trying to steal secret information and give it to the Russians. And this is not a one-off event, and we've got to make sure that if there's any more, we have to find them.
As soon as Ames was brought to justice, I ordered a comprehensive re-examination and both internal and external studies of our counterintelligence operation.
As a result, a presidential decision directive was issued that basically said, take a person with experience and seniority, send him over to the CIA. He's still FBI, but he'll run their counter-espionage group that's responsible for uncovering spies. I got a call when I was in Los Angeles. We want you to come back and run this group. When I went over to the counter-espionage group, I asked it if I could bring an assistant with me, somebody from the FBI. And John I had worked with previously in Los Angeles.
This opportunity to be the first FBI agents really inserted in almost light cover within the CIA was what I call a singular opportunity, and I tend to value those more. I said to Ed, I'll come, and I've never regretted it.
Most of the people in the CIA did not know I was there looking for a spy.
Did you have a CIA badge or an FBI?
CIA badge.
So they didn't know you were from the FBI?
Within the first week, everybody in that building knew I was from the FBI. They didn't particularly care for me being there, but they definitely knew who I was.
Inside the CIA headquarters building, people were whining and bitching about all kinds of things, and the FBI this and that. The FBI has a job to do, just like we do. We clearly had a serious problem.
Now, when I get over there, I get all my briefings, and I learned that I had over 300 cases in the CIA where CIA employees had failed its counterintelligence polygraph. That means is that you had 300 potential spies in the CIA that had never been resolved. At the time, if you fail a CIA polygraph, nothing ever happens to you. Aldrich Ames, he had failed the polygraph several times, and nothing was done. When I came in, I put a stop to that. I had my own polygraph examiner. We did our own test, and we brought the individual in and basically said, we're going to resolve this or you're not going anywhere. We had to resolve it one by one.
You must have been quite unpopular.
Very unpopular.
You had this pool of unresolved polygraphs, so you want to push and get those resolved as quickly as possible.
When you start from 300, it takes a long time to get down to half a dozen.
Now, unfortunately, a lot of the reasons why people were having trouble with the polygraph wasn't because they were a spy, is that they'd been playing loose with the rules when they're out there in the field.
But it's not espionage. Are you a spy? That's all I'm interested in. I'm not care if you didn't pay your income tax. In 98% of the cases we were able to resolve, they had nothing to do with espionage.
But then, in the summer of 1996, out of the herd, one individual particularly emerges. That was James Harold Nicholson.
Nicholson had failed the polygraph, plus he was assigned to various areas where cases went bad. So he was a suspect, a strong suspect at that time.
Jim Nicholson was an instructor at the CIA's training facility, the Farm.
He was one of the instructors to train spies, so he knew the identity of every agent that we were going to send overseas. And he could have provided this information to the Russians, and that's what concerned us the most.
When you expose a spy who's working in a hostile country that is not allied with us, for them, that's a death sentence. You're accused, you're tortured, and you're murdered.
His career, his experience is just devastating, even worse than Ames. I can't believe the potential damage he could have done. We had cases that Aldrich Ames was not involved in that went bad.
You assume at that point that somebody else is trying to steal secret information and give it to the Russians. This is not a one-off event. If there's any more, we have to find them.
In the summer of 1996, the FBI team had already whittled down their cast of possible candidates, and one of those was Jim Nicholson.
Jim Nicholson was working as a single dad and had custody of his 3 children.
For Jim, I think the divorce clearly precipitated some financial strains that weren't there before. Now being a single father, having to pay alimony, all those sort of pressures were coming to bear, together with his expensive tastes, tailored suits as opposed to off the rack.
His lifestyle demanded more money than you could make as a case officer, and it looked like he might be interested in making more money.
It's one thing to go after a spy who may have only had one course in counterintelligence. It's another thing to know you're going up with the senior varsity.
He was an extremely well-trained spy with a great deal of previous experience. We all knew that if we make one mistake with this guy, he's gone.
So with that information in hand, certain opportunities came up. One of them was Jim's announced vacation to Singapore.
So the discussion then came down with Director of Central Intelligence, George Tenet. Do we let him go? Don't we let him go? Decision was made by George Tenet that we would inform the Singaporean Intelligence Service, and Jim Nicholson would go to Singapore. When he got off the plane in Singapore, he's under surveillance.
And he almost immediately begins what we call dry cleaning, surveillance detection runs designed to pick up anybody trying to surveil or follow you. That's where the term dry cleaning comes from. You're stripping or cleansing yourself of any of these unwanted attachments. Going down a set of stairs and then immediately turning around and going back up. So if anyone's following you, you're likely to run right into them. Looking in the pane glass windows of large department stores. He's not looking at what's behind the glass, he's looking at the reflections in the glass. But going around town dry cleaning, doing surveillance detection runs is not what one usually does on a vacation.
But you're still only suspecting him because you don't have that last link. You haven't made your case yet.
But on the 3rd day of surveillance, the proverbial black limo pulls up to the curb, the door opens up, and Jim hops in. Of course, our surveillance team looks down to the license plate, Russian embassy.
Once he went in that embassy, he was a bad guy. There was no suspect anymore. He is the subject of an espionage investigation. Now you focus all your attention on building a case against him.
So after identifying Jim in Singapore as our spy, the next challenge was where do we position him so that he can do the least amount of damage?
So after discussion, the decision was made to put him as a branch chief in the counterterrorism center.
Given the environment at the time, this pre-9/11, that would be the place in which we could most effectively contain additional damage that he might do.
You don't demote him because then he's wondering what's going on here, but you promote him, you're letting him know he can go do what he wants because nobody's watching me.
So it was finally in June 1996 that Jim began his new duties as a branch chief in counterterrorism.
Now you have to collect the evidence and present it for an arrest warrant. We had to monitor his activities when he's outside of Langley 24 hours a day. That means every time he stepped foot outside his house, there had to be a surveillance on him. Anytime he's in his house, we have to know what he's talking about, who he's talking to. And then they had to know everything he's doing inside Langley. We had to get a human source in his office so that we know every time he gets up from his desk, he walks out, our guy goes out with him. We had to get somebody right next to him.
1996. I get a cable in the field that says you're assigned to human resources. It was something I didn't want to do, and I clearly thought I'd piss my division chief off, but I processed out of the field job I was in overseas and then came back. I did not want to be in human resources because that's like the kiss of death for a case officer. So sitting at my brand new desk in HR, one morning I got a call from the front offices, and the boss up there called up and said, "Don't tell anybody where you're going, speak to nobody, get up here in front of my desk right now." I said, "Okay."
McGuire sat down. The chief explained to him, "We want to put you on a very special assignment, but we're not going to tell you what it's about.
And you have to give me an answer, yes or no, right now.
And if it's no, your career is over." I didn't say that, but that was implied.
There was a long pause where I didn't say anything, and neither did he. The only variable that I had in the room was there was a man in there that I didn't recognize. I said, "Can I ask one question?" He said, "You can ask it, I might not answer, but go ahead." I said, "Who is this man? Who is this guy?"
I got up, I walked over, introduced myself, shook his hand.
And introduced himself as Ed Curran, the highest ranking FBI agent assigned inside CIA. My mind was racing at that point, and he said, "You got to give me an answer now. If you say no, go back down to HR. If you say yes, you'll figure out what this is all about." And I just decided if this is a way out of HR, I'm in. And I said, "Fuck it, yeah, I'll take it. I'll do it."
Once he accepted the assignment, I said, "Go outside now, go outside the building, don't stop, don't say anything to anybody, and 2 people will meet you."
I said, "Yes, sir," and I left the building. And they took me to a safe house in Northern Virginia. The case agents then briefed me on what the issue was, and they told me, "We have a spy inside the building, and we want you to help us catch him." Initially, it was like getting kicked in the stomach. Another major espionage case inside of CIA. It was a devastating piece of information.
We had to have someone as close up as possible to Nicholson, and John hopefully was going to be that candidate. But you couldn't thrust John on Jim or Jim would be suspicious. You had to do it in a way that Jim would think it was his choice, his selection that brought John into the game.
The first step was go through the interview process and get him to pick you. And that job was the deputy chief of the unit that was run by Nicholson. The interview wasn't particularly long, but I got along well with him. It was clear he didn't have a lot of good things to say about the structure of the leadership cadre in the agency. My views of HR were a good laugh during the interview, and he understood completely that I thought I was going to die if I stayed there. Whenever you have an interaction with anybody that's a planned activity, you always come back and reflect on what you did, and I came away with the opinion that it went pretty good.
Jim did an excellent job as a manager choosing the best person for that job. And ultimately, he chose McGuire. Unbeknownst to Jim, John was a spy, and it was probably the last person he wanted to have next to him.
And ended up sitting in the desk in the office right next to Nicholson's, and then it was game on.
Going to McGuire is a big, big risk, because now you're going outside your perimeter. This is a person who's going to be the closest to Nicholson, day in and day out. They're going to go to lunch. They're going to, talk about cases. So that person could do something stupid, and Nicholson, of course, would be alerted that something's wrong here.
Basically, you have a one-strike scenario. If you mess up or you give away something, you could derail the entire investigation. I was brought in as an undercover guy to work against Jim Nicholson. My job was to catch him doing an espionage act that would directly tie him to the Russians. So in the spring of 1996, I started as Nicholson's deputy in the Counterterrorism Center. At that time, radical Islamic terrorism was on the rise, so there was a lot of real work stuff going on that you had to focus on.
They were looking at critical players who eventually became known post 9/11, so it was very critical stuff that they were doing.
In the middle of all that, you're trying to catch your boss compiling information that he's going to give to the Russians.
To have someone, a human source, in touch with him every day, it's invaluable.
Getting to know him was part of the exercise. I've spent a lot of time going to lunch with him, drinking beer with him. My goal with the investigation was to immerse myself in him, but it was mentally draining every day because I describe him as a flawed personality, a flawed man. Over time, that became very apparent that he had a special view of himself, a ruthless, narcissistic guy who didn't care about anybody. And you're with him all the time. There was no retreat from him.
Jim Nicholson is the most formidable opponent you could possibly go up against as a counter-espionage agent because he's so well trained in the craft.
And McGuire provided personality assessment back to the FBI. What's he thinking? How is he thinking? And John was very, very good at it.
And even with John, as close as John was to him, it still wasn't giving us the exact intel and insights as to what is he doing minute by minute, second by second. That's one of the reasons why we eventually knew we had to get a fiber optic camera in his office. You know, you see those tile ceilings with the thousands of little pinholes in them. It was no bigger than just one of those little pinholes.
At one point, Nicholson got up on his chair and was rooting around in the ceiling.
He was getting up and actually reaching up into the ceiling and pushing tiles.
What did you do?
John, move your butt. He's lifting tiles. Doesn't take much more than that. John understands the implications.
So I just barged into his office, and he was standing on the chair, and I asked him, I said, "What the hell are you doing in here?" He says, "I thought something was loose. I was just taking a look." I said, "Oh, okay." He didn't find anything. He didn't disrupt anything. So there was no compromise, and everybody breathed a huge sigh of relief.
Next thing we needed was to get access to his van that he parks in the parking lot. That was a big thing.
He was like a Northern Virginia soccer mom. He had a minivan. But for him, I mean, it fit the mold. He was playing a role. He didn't want to attract any attention to himself. A single dad driving a minivan with 3 kids. You know, invisible guy in Northern Virginia.
We managed to manipulate him in a way that he would go on a business trip, leave his van at the Langley compound as opposed to park in his driveway at home. Then, of course, we didn't want to get careless or lazy. There are still eyes on the Langley compound, so we did it really, really late at night.
We had to pick up that van, physically pick it up, forklift it, because he may have checked the odometer reading on it. Pulled it into another garage on CIA compound, and the FBI went through the whole van.
Some people say, isn't that a little extreme, putting it on a flatbed so the odometer wouldn't even change? I said, not if you're trained like Jim was trained.
He knows how to detect surveillance. He can put traps in the car. He knows all these techniques.
You underestimate him at your own peril, is what we felt.
They went through that van and they got significant data, intelligence data. He had left his computer in there, everything.
We were able to image that laptop and do a quick initial assessment as to what was on there. And we found a tasking order from his Russian handler. And that's even before we did the really in-depth analysis that we were able to do in an off-site. We discovered that he'd given the true name and identity of the spies who had gone through the CIA training program with him to his Russian handler.
That was a line that really frosted me at that point, because that is a mercenary activity that I don't think any other spy has ever done.
The question at that point is, do you have enough for arrest and conviction? We didn't have that at that time.
I wanted to shoot him at his desk, the truth be told, but I wanted to catch him. And in October, we had the first major break in the case. I had gone off campus and had lunch with Nicholson, and Nicholson was driving erratically, and it looked like he was doing a surveillance detection run. And he said, "We're going to a post office. I collect stamps. There's some unusual stamps here." And we went out to the post office, he bought them, and then we proceeded back to the building from there. And for me, looking at it as a case officer, I thought, he's gonna mail something overseas.
Going to the post office, get a special stamp, that would be a clue. That would have alerted the FBI right away that something's unusual happening.
John gave us the heads up that we needed to watch him like a hawk. We summoned the resources and we did just that.
They bet heavy on what I told them. They covered him relentlessly, and they caught him mailing a postcard to the Russians. They processed his postcard as evidence and then put the mail back in the box and sent it on its way.
The postcard indicating his intent to travel and meet with his Russian handler.
Hello, old friend. I hope it is possible that you will be my guest for a ski holiday this year on 23-24 November. A bit early, but it would fit my schedule nicely. I am fine and all is well. Hope you are the same and can accept my invitation. Best regards, Neville R. Strachey.
Who the heck is Neville R. Strachey?
It could be a code name for him. There's a variety of things it could mean.
That's a communication between him and the Russians, saying, "I'm ready for my next meet." It's a signal that he's doing something.
Once we saw the contents of that letter, we knew we had to finally bring this thing down. But what really put the nails in that final coffin was prior to his trip, we witnessed Jim on that fiber optic camera photographing classified documents to pass along to his Russian handlers.
We knew he was taking pictures of classified documents. He was storing up and getting ready for his trip. It was like cramming for an exam. We knew that if he was leaving the country for a meeting with the Russians, that Nicholson would have to take the compromising material and his intelligence with him. So we were very confident that when he left on this next trip, he would have classified material in his person or his bags in some fashion. We just had to find it. We've got enough to convict him of espionage and arrest him. They caught Jim Nicholson mailing a postcard to the Russians.
That's a communication saying, "I'm ready for my next meet." It's a signal that he's doing something.
But what really put the nails in that final coffin was prior to his trip, we witnessed Jim photographing classified documents to pass along to his Russian handlers.
We were very confident that when he left on this next trip, he would have classified material in his person or his bags in some fashion. We just had to find it. We've got enough to convict him of espionage and arrest him.
November 16, 1996, at Dulles International Airport, the FBI finally brought this matter to conclusion.
The FBI placed themselves throughout the area in undercover positions surrounding the entire plane.
We had agents positioned as bag handlers.
There were FBI agents everywhere. He would go through security, so you were sure that he had nothing on him that could be a weapon. He was also through security and committed himself to leaving the country to prove that he was en route to meet the Russians.
They went out on the tarmac there at Dulles and let Jim know that his life as a spy had now ended.
His entire life collapsed around him in a 5-second window where he realized at that moment, my life is over. The look on his face was the only honest look I saw on his face the whole time I knew the man.
This arrest demonstrates that the counterintelligence reforms that have been put into place in the wake of Aldrich Ames have taken hold and that have led to our success in catching the spy Nicholson.
In February 1997, Jim finally reached a plea deal with the prosecution.
And he was there at the trial table as he read his statement. We locked eye contact briefly, and then he just turned away, but his face looked ashen when he turned away. And then he walked away, and that's the last time I've ever laid eyes on the guy.
Jim Nicholson reached a plea agreement and was sentenced to 23 years. And at his request, he was transferred to a prison in Oregon so that he could be close to his children and his family.
Why was he spying for the Russians? What was he getting from it?
I think it's a good question, but I don't know. He claims he needed the money, but I think that's just an excuse.
I think he viewed himself as a master spy that could operate with impunity in our face.
It's like pursuing adventure all the time in the Foreign Service. Wherever you go, you'll find something interesting to do.
He asked for it. He chose poorly, and he paid for it. And he'll pay for it till he draws his last breath.
In the summer of 2007, I got called down to the special agent in charge's office out of the blue and asked if I was interested in working on a very important case that would ultimately be very high profile. And so, of course, the next logical question from my perspective was, well, what is it? And the answer was, you've got to say yes before we'll tell you what it is that you're going to be working on.
I was called into my supervisor's office in Eugene, Oregon, and he told me that this sensitive case had come up, and he said he wanted me to close or reassign every case that I had, which was very unusual, and considering I had some significant cases going at the time and terrorism cases. So I drove the 110 miles up to Portland and got briefed.
We learned that Jim Nicholson's son, Nathan Nicholson, was suspected of working with his father and making contact with the Russians.
I was familiar with James Nicholson's case, him being the highest ranking CIA officer ever convicted of espionage. But Nathan, I knew nothing about Nathan. I mean, he's 12 years old when his dad went to jail in '96.
At that point, we needed additional information to solidly make the criminal case.
Well, even though Jim was in prison, he was very high up in the ranks, and he knew quite a bit about the inner workings of the agency.
You never know for sure what information that he could still be giving them. We needed to find out what it was that was being provided by Jim Nicholson to the Russians. So we went back and looked at the telephone calls that he had made to try to glean information that might be useful for the case.
You have a prepaid call from...
This is Dad Car Daddy.
An inmate at a federal...
Hey, Bob. Hey, Nate. I thought I'd call you and see what kind of hours you're keeping these days.
Oh, pretty much the same, I guess.
Yeah?
Yeah, I'm on the road heading back now.
Oh, are you? Okay. Did everything go okay?
Yeah, everything went real well. I got a sale for about 5K.
Oh, so business is picking up, huh?
Yeah, sure is.
Oh, excellent.
I mean, there were some odd phone calls of him making a sale for 5K. And Nathan was barely treading water. I think he made, about $9,000 in a year from Pizza Hut. And he lived in a small apartment over in Springfield, Oregon. Our job was now to start peeling the onion about Nathan and finding out what he might be doing for his father that involved Russian intelligence.
Nathan had been going to visit Jim since he was 12 years old, and he idolized his dad from those contacts.
He seemed to be a very dutiful son, really cared about his family, his siblings, his religious convictions. He seemed like a pretty nice person that had been trying to make his own way since he was probably about 12 years old, when things weren't working out for him. He tried to go to school, then he tried the Army, and then he got injured, and, his life had been a series of setbacks.
I think Nathan was vulnerable at that point to looking for some direction, and Dad had a plan in mind. I do know that he used scripture to try to influence and manipulate his boy in a way that, in my view, was not positive.
Hey, I got a verse for you. It's Isaiah 45:3.
Isaiah 45:3.
Yep. It's really going to be a good one.
I got my Bible here. And I will give you treasures hidden in the darkness, secret riches. I will do this so that you may know that I am the Lord, the God of Israel, the one who calls you by name.
Yep.
Wow. I like that.
Yeah?
I like that.
I claimed it for you and me.
Absolutely.
You know, basically was telling Nathan he was a loyal soldier, and, we're doing God's work. It's appalling, I mean, again, I don't think Jim would make Father of the Year, far from it.
We were eager to start monitoring Nathan's telephone calls, his travel in his car, all the kinds of ways that he might communicate with the Russians to find out what was it that he could be giving them that might be of value.
We were able to monitor his computer use, and we were able to get a GPS on his car.
The GPS was put on the 5th of December, which was a Friday.
But it was not until the following Monday when they went to test the GPS for the first time. It worked perfectly, but the problem was the car was at Portland International Airport. That was a surprise, not a pleasant surprise. We found out he had flown out of Portland International to Lima, Peru.
So immediately we assumed that he was going to Peru to meet with the Russians. Figured out what his itinerary was in terms of when he would be returning. The decision was made to intercept him when he came back into the country.
We found out Jim's son, Nathan, had flown out of Portland International to Lima, Peru.
So immediately we assumed that he was going to Peru to meet with the Russians. And a decision was made to intercept him when he came back into the country. When he came through customs in Houston,
we were waiting for him. We had FBI agents down there. They, in concert with Customs and Border Protection, pulled Nathan aside for secondary inspection. They were able to separate him from his backpack, and we were able to search that.
So while Customs agents were interviewing Nathan about the purpose of his trip, FBI agents were copying all the paperwork that Nathan had brought back with him.
And during that search, we found a number of very incriminating items that really broke the case wide open.
They found some money that he brought back.
I think it was over $7,000 or $8,000 on him.
And they found a notebook that had a lot of very interesting information in it.
The notebook was pretty much the jackpot. It confirmed he had addresses of the Russian embassy in Mexico City. He had the address for the Russian embassy in Lima, Peru.
The Russians were always very interested in trying to find out how Jim Nicholson got caught the first go-around. Just like any spy agency, they're concerned with moles in their midst.
The notebook confirmed that Jim used his son Nathan as a courier, to courier messages from Jim in prison, and then courier questions back from the Russians through Nathan back to him in prison, for which they received compensation. And in the notebook, we found information about this Mexican Yahoo account with a password in it, and they were to use code words in their communication. His father would be Eugene, he was Dick, and the Russians were Nancy.
This little notebook had a treasure trove of information in it that then allowed us to pretty much predict what was going to happen from that point forward.
I think Nathan wanted to do such a good job and make sure he didn't make any mistakes and forget anything that he kept detailed notes. Nathan was not a very good spy.
After this all happened, they let him go on his way and went home. We had discussions back at headquarters as to where we wanted to go with this case.
The evidence we got from the custom search in Houston was very suspicious, but in and of itself, it was still circumstantial.
So a decision was made at that point that we were going to let this play out because we needed to develop additional information to solidly make the criminal case.
In October 2008, Nathan logged on to the Yahoo Mexican account using the password, and he'd left a message using code names to confirm another meeting with the Russians for a December 10th meeting in Nicosia, Cyprus. It was like, hola, Nancy, it's good to hear from you. My brother Eugene as well.
The Russians were Nancy, Nathan was Dick, and Jim was Eugene.
The meeting for Cyprus was on.
Prior to his trip to Cyprus, Nathan received a letter from his father, which, when I saw it, immediately jumped out at me as something that could not have been designed for Nathan's viewing, but had to have been for the Russians. It was all sorts of information about Jim and his children.
Jim goes into his eldest son's background, who was in the Air Force.
Jeremy Nicholson was still in the military. He had a secret clearance.
Jim was trying to throw a carrot to the Russians, like, hey, I have this other son. Maybe down the road, this will be of some value. I looked at Jim's letters. I go, Jim, you SOB. You SOB to hear you did this to Nathan, and now you're putting this out there. I mean, you could be actually putting your oldest son and family in jeopardy.
Nathan traveled to Cyprus in December of 2008 for the purpose of meeting with the Russians while there. He was supposed to meet them at a TGI Fridays on the evening of Wednesday, December the 8th. The Russians met him at that location, and he was ultimately paid $12,000. And he provided the Russians with the letter that had been given to him by Jim that had all the information about Jim and his children.
We knew we had enough evidence to charge the father, charge the son. It was time to bring it to a close. After Nathan came back from Cyprus, we knew we had enough evidence to charge the father, charge the son. It was time to bring it to a close.
And so when he came back from Cyprus, Nathan was interviewed on the 15th of December in 2008.
That was right when he came back, when he was tired, when he was suffering from jet lag. You know, it was a good time to catch him off guard, get him out of his comfort zone.
But he started off just lying, and he lied for the first hour of the interview about what he was doing in Cyprus and why he went.
They stopped him at one point and said, look, we'll give you a do-over, we'll give you a mulligan, and give you a chance to set this right. You know, you say lying to the FBI is a crime. We know quite a bit about your travel. I think he really wanted to get this off his chest. And for the next hour or two, he pretty much confessed to everything and gave a written confession.
But he didn't actually get arrested until a couple weeks later. We wanted to see what he might say post-interview while we still had electronic coverage of him. You know, his conversation with other people showing guilty knowledge, guilty intent.
And one of the conversations we overheard is after he was interviewed by the FBI was with his sister Star.
Nathan, are you okay?
Yeah, I'm okay. Are you okay?
I'm good. What's up with the FBI?
Well, it's kind of a long story, to be honest with you.
You know, the FBI interviewed everybody.
Yeah, I know. But what was going on is I was transporting some information.
Uh-huh.
And, getting paid for it.
Okay.
And that's what the whole deal was about.
Whose information was it for?
Well, it was for the Russians.
Dude. Seriously, it just sounds kind of like what Daddy did.
Yeah, it was exactly what Daddy did, and he acknowledged that he'd sort of been living a lie for the last year and a half. I went out to talk to Jim Nicholson in the prison on December the 15th. I showed him a postcard that had written on it, "Welcome to Cyprus." And I explained to him at that point that we knew what had been going on. And he said, well, it sounds like what you're trying to do is put Nathan in jail. So before I say anything, I think I'm going to need to talk to an attorney. As a parent myself, I would have thought he'd been ready to do most anything to try to get Nathan out of the jam. but he didn't help his son.
In January, Nathan was arrested and eventually released on bail, but I think he spent about 72 days in jail.
Jim gave him the idea that he had not done anything wrong right from get-go. And so being held in jail, it kind of helped him to the conclusion that maybe his dad hadn't been as good a friend as he always let himself out to be.
I had myself believe that I wasn't doing anything wrong. You know, here's my hero. He was trying to help me out. And I still wrestle with the idea that he may or may not have manipulated me.
Nathan received 5 years probation from the judge, and Jim got an additional 8-year sentence and was ultimately sent to Supermax in Florence, Colorado. Jim Nicholson basically said it was just a way to help out the family, but I don't think so. I think he's just full of himself. I mean, Jim fancied himself as being quite the spy master, but how good a spy could Jim have been? He's the only guy I know that ever got caught twice.
Were you surprised that Jim had used his son to contact the Russians?
Surprised? Not really. Further disappointed? Yeah. Somewhat shocked from the perspective of a father, that one father could do this to his son, but that's what desperate people do.
Do you think he loved his kids?
He loved his kids, but he loved himself more. He's an extreme narcissist. You know, I think you'd have to put it that way.
For the father to do this to his family, I can't believe it. What makes somebody do that? And then use his son to continue the operation? That's deplorable.
His whole belief system's been destroyed by his father. I don't know how that kid deals with that. And I, as a parent, I don't know how any person can do that to their own child. He's forever labeled the son of a spy. That will trail him for the rest of his life.